everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. We are happy to have you for our first official full meeting of the Success Network Policy Committee of the year. To get started, just a little bit of an overview at some of the topics that we're going to cover today. We'll start with welcome and introductions, and then we are going to go over some legislative session highlights and different pieces of potential legislation that are moving around in the General Assembly, as well as some other policy updates. We're going to talk about a proposed plan to start some work groups within the policy committee. And then, as Emily mentioned, we're going to do a Jamboard activity before we wrap up and have some final announcements. For welcome and introduction for all of you, if you could each put your name and your organization in the chat, and if you would like to share one thing that you're looking forward to in the spring. For those of you who are joining us newly or who I have not met before, I'll introduce myself. My name is Laura Monagudo. I am a policy and program manager with Ed Systems. Marcy, I agree, warm weather and sunshine. I don't know about anyone else. This gray weather has been really getting to me the last couple of weeks. With that, I will pass it along to Emily to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Ruska, also at Ed Systems with Laura on our policy team here. And I am definitely looking forward to hopefully some drier weather. It's been a very wet winter, not cold, but very wet. And I just would like for it to dry out a little bit. But Edith, I'll kick to you.
Thanks, Emily. Edith Jabuna, Director of the Success Network, and looking forward to some warmer weather as well.
Great. Thank you, Edith. So moving right along into our first topic for today is the legislative highlights. So as many of us know, the General Assembly is really going in full legislative session at this point. A lot of things have been happening the last month or so. So we're going to cover some pieces of legislation that we have deemed relevant to this committee. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. So we actually are going to have a point later if there is anything that any of you have been working on to share. And then also want to add that to the best of our knowledge, these are all bills that are still moving in some way or another. Some have passed and we'll share if they have out of committee. Some are not in all different places, but at best of our knowledge, these are all things that are still moving for the session that's in progress. The first few that we have here are really seeking to address some of the teacher pipeline challenges that have been coming up. I know this is something that's even come up in our earlier meetings that we've had, both the general teacher needs as well as some more specific ones. So these bills, one, a House resolution, both kind of work to address those needs in different ways. So HR 62, that is a resolution to push for a teacher recruitment system. I know that our friends at Advance have been working on this one, so I don't know if there is anyone from Advance on the line, but if you have anything to add on HR 62, happy to open the floor up to you. The other one really aims to provide some money for teachers who are working on those professional development plans. So again, noting that there are more specific needs than just teachers in general, but also staffing for dual credit courses.
I can jump in quickly. Sorry, I'm here from the Advanced Illinois team. So appreciate you highlighting that bill and can just share that. Some of you might know that ISB has actually already set aside funds to start working on this. So this is something that is going to happen, which is really exciting, but we're still moving the legislation forward just to ensure that it does happen, it does come to fruition, and that people know about it. So I just want to get that update.
Thank you.
That's great, super helpful.
Okay, some other pieces, a lot focused on enhancing data reporting to inform, the statewide equity work that's going on and just work in general. We talked at our January data deep dive and in our December meeting about how important data really is at helping inform some of those decisions that we're making when coming up with programs or policies at local district levels. So these do that in a lot of different ways. The first one, SB 2031, aims to include more disaggregated data overall on the school report card and is pretty broad in the pieces that it calls for. Whereas 2240 is going to specifically refer to some of that community college remediation data. So this is actually not a piece of the school report card, but again, kind of tying back to the need for data to inform some of the work. Some of their data is moving to inform the work. So making sure that high schools are going to get remediation data about any of their students who enroll in the community colleges shared with them, so that they can use that information to inform some of the decisions that they're making.
To Travis's question in the chat, I need to look back at the language in the bill. I think one of the questions that we have is if it does reference sort of the appropriate N sizes for those of you like who are slightly less obsessed with data, N sizes being the number under which we wouldn't be able to share data because it would essentially serve as personally identifiable information. So typically, for example, on the Illinois school report card data, where there is a subgroup that is smaller than 10 students, that you would not see those data represented on the report card. It would be what's called suppressed in order to protect the sort of identities of those students, even though it's not like their name and student identifier. But I need to look directly at 2240 on that. If it ends up passing, there would be a lot of negotiation between the data teams to make sure that the appropriate sort of FERPA, which is around student data privacy, would be addressed. I think there's a risk given how few students this might be in some cases. But we don't know. I don't think there's necessarily language in the bill, but I think if it passes, this would be something that would have to be negotiated with sort of legal teams and data teams in order to make sure they're adhering to FERPA.
Just quickly, it would be very helpful again in smaller districts. That's the problems that we run into where we don't get a lot of data on that because our N is so small.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not like it's public data. Right, so maybe an IGA would need to be created that would allow the sharing of that data, so we could have those, informed, have that information to help form our decisions.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is the challenge, right? We want to value privacy and security of student data, and also there are many small districts in the state that would benefit from knowing what's happening with their students once they leave their doors. And if they, there's got to be some ways of making it happen.
And then our final bill that we have for this piece is more related to IDHE annually publishing a list of in-demand jobs, which is more information about those in terms of their starting salary, median, typical education level needed, just to provide more information relevant to the state, again, to inform some of the work and decisions that you all are making.
And I'll just note that, there are existing efforts through the Illinois Department of Employment Security and Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to publish in-demand jobs. And there's many other kind of resources for those data. So definitely find it interesting that IDHE is being pushed to do that. I think that's kind of in the vein of conversations around ensuring there's a good return on investment for students who are enrolling in our IBHE institutions. Pranav, yes, agree that there are a lot of people who produce data on in-demand jobs. So we'll have, if this gets passed, we'll have another one. But my guess is that IBHE would look to work with other agencies or other organizations that are currently in that space, just to work smarter, not harder. That is my assumption, but I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, because we look at this whenever we're looking at degree programs, like approving degree programs. So we have the data, but it's not from us. I don't think it's
Right.
from another source. So
Right. And there are, on the Illinois post-secondary profiles, there's a lot of data around kind of workforce related outcomes as it pertains to different kind of degree programs and what have you. That's more sort of like summary data, but it's not like an in-demand job framework in the way that this is sort of asking. Right. I think this is me. Thanks, Sophia. Yes, the college to career data set. Yeah, so thanks for dropping the college to career link in the chat, Sophia. And yeah, I guess it's just formalizing sort of that existing collaboration in that case. So just a couple of things wanting to flag here. These bills were being advanced by the Illinois Manufacturers Association in collaboration with some legislators. A couple of key challenges around work-based learning, as we've talked about as a group before, is around sort of liability insurance, as well as transportation challenges. And we'll talk a lot more about transportation challenges a little bit later. But, while these bills are sort of evolving, they are still alive in the legislature. With the career development insurance bill, the HB 3590, the original intent of that was to get ISB together with some of the other relevant agencies, including CMS and ICCB and what have you, to create a liability insurance system to cover students participating in career development experiences, teachers participating in externships, et cetera. There is an amendment that is in place, or that has been added, that basically transforms this to convening an advisory committee that would include a whole host of folks representing education, workforce, and the legislature to essentially kind of summarize the challenges and provide some recommendations around providing liability insurance. We know that this is something that happens in sort of patchwork ways around the state. And so I think the general spirit of this was to say, how do we make sure that this is something that is not getting in the way of students being able to access work-based learning or teachers being able to participate in externships, et cetera. And so how do we systematize that? But, this will be kind of another step in the direction of being able to get our arms around the challenge there. And then similarly, there was a House Bill 3309 that essentially directed the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board to publish a report about transportation barriers to accessing work-based learning, both at high school and college level. We know that the Career Pathways for Target Populations Committee of the IWIB and their opportunity youth subgroup particularly are trying to explore those issues in the first place. And this would have sort of formalized that. It's likely to evolve into a House resolution, which doesn't have quite the same binding power as a bill would, but it would still kind of push the IWIB and, strongly encourage the IWIB to issue that kind of report. And again, we're going to talk more about the transportation challenges in a little bit here. So I'll just sort of note that we're going to put a pin in that. And go ahead to the next slide. There is some work trying to establish advanced manufacturing programs in a few different regions around the state. And this would be kind of advancing partnerships across colleges and employer partners. This would, kind of build from existing work in the state around manufacturing pathways broadly. There's a lot of local work happening around the state, both at the high school and college level. And this would kind of build from that. So this is another kind of in the college and career readiness space that is moving. And then the next one we have up is a bill around a youth employment strategy, like a year-round youth employment strategy. So the original language in the bill was directing DCEO to create a future through employment for young adults program. It seems to be in the process of getting amended and moved around and oriented towards firearm violence prevention. So that it's I think it's still sort of in negotiations, but the idea being that this would be providing youth employment supports and job placement supports during school year and summertime. So, you know, we know that there are various approaches to youth employment across the state and in various cities around the state. And this would kind of, I think, seed further youth employment strategies around the state. And I think this is back to Laura. Or no, is that me? I'm sorry, guys. This is
I
me.
think it was you.
So, as we've mentioned before, the Illinois P20 Council launched a couple of work groups last year as they were moving away from standing committees, which is, you know, part of the origin story of us convening this committee. But one of those work groups was really focused on computer science specifically, not digital literacy, but really computer science programming and delivery. So there are a handful of bills having to do with that. So there's this I Grow Illinois program that would kind of provide incentives for students to, and scholarship incentives for students to major in certain computer science fields and work in specific types of computer science occupations that are listed in the legislation for a certain number of years after graduating in order to kind of fulfill their scholarship requirement. And that's sort of still in some negotiation processes with an amendment, but it looks like it's moving forward apace. The other bill that we've listed here is around a competitive grant program. I don't know.
Sorry.
That's okay. A competitive grant program around computer science. So essentially acknowledging that like computer science is not being delivered fully across all of our K-12 districts in the state. And it's a requirement for graduation now, computer science for students. So, you know, kind of in acknowledgement of that, trying to build up the capacity of districts around the state to deliver computer science programming. And then I think we got one more on the graduation requirements piece here, and then I'll hand it back to Laura. Sorry about my premature handing it back to you. One thing that we probably will spend more time talking about with this group just generally is sort of the suite of graduation requirements in the state and how they all work together or not in some ways. But unsurprising to know anyone is that there are more graduation requirements on the book. Or emerging on the books. So in particular, there's a financial education bill that essentially would require districts to swap consumer education for financial education, a financial education course around, you know, various components of financial literacy and all that kind of stuff. This seems to be moving forward pretty quickly. It has pretty strong legs, and I'm sure there are many on the line here who have been hearing about it. I'll also just note that there were a couple of, I know we've heard from folks in this committee before, not necessarily on this committee, but in this committee, that the foreign language graduation requirement, which was part of the education and workforce equity package or omnibus a couple years ago, that is a challenging requirement for districts to meet, the 2 years of foreign language for graduation for students. It's aligned to the University of Illinois' kind of admissions practices, but there were a couple of bills that were attempting to either eliminate or soften that requirement this year, but both of those seem to be dead in the water, as it were. So I'll just note that. But I think that the dialogue is continuing around those bills in particular, or that concept in particular, you know, of graduation requirements. I think one of the things that we'll probably want to talk about with you guys one day is sort of a more comprehensive like thought process around graduation requirements as a whole and how that's impacting districts and students.
Okay, now I will take the reins back and move us forward. The last piece I believe that we have in this section before we open it up is some bills that are both aimed at helping to smooth post-secondary transitions for transfer students. So both in different ways, kind of aiming at some of those different obstacles that we often see transfer students facing. So 3760 is basically piloting a uniform admissions system for community college transfer students. This is generally supported by the regional public institutions, and is really just, again, trying to make it so that transfer students aren't getting bogged down in all various different application admissions processes for our Illinois public universities. 2288 amends Illinois
Excuse me.
articulation. Oh, sorry.
Excuse me, before you go on, you said 3760 was the number on that legislation? Is that a House bill or a Senate bill?
House bill, yep.
Yes.
And we'll
House
share,
Bill
again, we'll share the
3760.
slides and recording out with folks after for sure.
Yes.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
So 3760 is a House bill. 2288 is a Senate bill. So Senate Bill 2288 amends the Illinois Articulation Initiative, doing a couple things. One in particular, addressing a common obstacle that a lot of students face, and that is pretty directly related to a lot of the work in the state about helping students to complete dual credit, but also really pushing that dual credit with a purpose. In the past, obviously, one of the big obstacles that's come up is students weren't necessarily getting direct credit for some of those more career focused courses. So this would basically require public institutions to offer direct course equivalents for a lot of the major courses. And then it would also call for an elementary and secondary education panel to be convened under the IAI.
And that elementary and secondary education panel builds from recommendations from the kind of educator pipeline work group that Advance Illinois was convening, that advanced recommendations around having an IAI panel because there aren't enough education related courses in IAI currently. So this is pushing that forward. And really this is like the IAI is already a very innovative thing. Not every state has this, but this would really continue to advance it as a really strong contributor to our transfer pathways being healthy in Illinois.
Yes, and then the last thing on these is just that both of these have passed out of committee, so they're both moving along. Sorry, my keyboard commands are not working for some reason. All right, so as I mentioned, this is definitely not all of the relevant bills that are out there. So just kind of want to open it up. Is there anyone who has been involved with any of these bills? Are there any other bills that you've been tracking?
I know, for example, I know I saw some PCC folks on the line. And I know y'all have been involved in some of the MAP, monetary award program bills that have been going. I'm curious if there are some updates there that y'all want to share with the crew here, just to put y'all on the spot.
Sure, I'm happy to share about that. Can you hear me okay? So I believe it's HB 2898 is a bill that we're supporting. Representative West is sponsoring it in the House. And it's, short name would be the Payback MAP bill. Basically, any institution in the future, any for-profit institution that is found by a federal agency to have deceptive practices would have to pay back the MAP that it received over that time period of the judgment. So those judgments can include one handed down by the agency as a determination, or something that would be found in court as like some misleading practices, like FTC lawsuits have had in the past. So basically, this would be forward-looking, and any future violations by MAP receiving for-profit colleges would be taken into account, and they would have to pay back that money to ISAC.
Thanks for letting me put you on the spot, Mike. Anyone else have other bills that they've been involved in or tracking that are worth kind of raising to the group?
Emily, this is Eddie. Not that it's a bill, but there's I don't know if there's folks on here who participated in a financial empowerment task force over the last year or so. But there was a report that was submitted in December, and part of those recommendations are, my God, it was a lot to look at, the K through 12, but I think even the four-year institutions on formalizing and providing a financial literacy course, which, reading the last slide about, you know, swapping out a financial literacy for an actual course. I'm just throwing it out there as, you know, this is interesting to me. I wonder how these two things will meet as people are talking about them, because if this is successful with swapping out a financial literacy course, instead pretty much standardizing, you know, the requirement for all Illinois schools or juniors and seniors, just the impact on any further recommendations on that landscape. So I'm interested in it. Thank you for bringing that to the forefront, because it's something that I'll definitely keep my eyes on.
Thanks, Eddie. I see someone's got their hand raised.
Yeah, that's me again.
Awesome. Jump in, Mike.
Thanks. So also not a bill, although I guess kind of, because it's an appropriations bill, but something that we're monitoring and advocating for at PCC is the equitable distribution of public university funding. Basically, IDHE recommended a 7.5% increase, divided or distributed based off of some of how these CARES funding was distributed to different universities based on the number and percentage of students from low income backgrounds at those institutions. The governor's office recommendation supported a similar increase, but distributed across the board. So PCC is kind of rallying to try to make sure that that funding gets distributed equitably, so that we have a base of funding in our state that has a more equitable distribution than what we currently see.
Thanks, Mike. I'm seeing, thanks Darius for adding to the chat here. HB 2170, the computer science curriculum, right? Which is another one of that kind of suite of computer science bills. And I'm curious if you're welcome to join or speak up if you would like, about sort of some of your reflections on any changes that it's going to be pushing on for educators. But also happy to just kind of, if you want to keep it in the chat, that's totally fine too. But the floor is yours if you would like to share more.
Yeah, no worries. So one thing that we've been able to pay attention to with that is just I guess on our perspective as an intermediary organization, you know, working with different schools and different organizations, one thing we notice is that there has been this increase in wanting more, you know, computer science curriculum, but there aren't as many computer science educators that are out there. So in addition to, you know, identifying what strategies we can work around to support the bill, also identifying other ways that we can work to train different staff members, different educators around the city to be able to also implement this curriculum that we may be able to kind of develop or co-develop with them to be able to push out into their different districts. Hope that explains a little more.
Yes, thank you. Is there anyone else that has any reflections or last pieces to share before we move forward to our next set of updates?
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Sophia.
Yep, we hear you, Sophia.
Okay, I've been having a lot of problems with audio lately, so I put my headphones in because my computer mic stops working at random. On SB 2288, both, from my former role at IBHE and my new role at U of I system, and just having worked extensively with the IAI in my role at IBHE, I really feel compelled to say that first of all, the recommendation was to create a working group to look at the possibility of creating an education panel, not to actually create the education panel. And there are many groups that, including the IAI itself, the beauty of the IAI is that it's faculty driven, that it is, well, anyway, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I guess I'll just summarize by saying that I do think that it would be very worthwhile to talk with the institutions, talk with the actual staff at the IAI, because no panel has been ever mandated by statute before, and there's a reason for that. And there are many reasons that I could elaborate on, but I don't want to derail the meeting. But there are many reasons that for which creating an education, and especially a secondary education panel, just really don't make sense. And so I felt like I really had to get that, to say that. Again, not wanting to derail the meeting, but just that there is opposition to this, and it's based on very logical reasons by people who understand the IAI, who understand how the IAI works, why it's created, such an incredible transfer system in the state, and why this is a bad idea.
Thank
So,
you. Yeah.
with
thanks
respect, I
thank
had to
you
say
for
that.
sharing. No, appreciate
Yeah.
you sharing that. And thank you for clarifying the recommendation from the work group. You're right that
Yeah.
it didn't say create a panel. It said explore the creation of a panel. So appreciate you weighing in on that.
And also, I guess just maybe one other thing, because in the introduction, there was mention of workforce development, dual credit. To be clear, for a course to be approved by the IAI, it has to be a course that is offered both at the community college level and at the 4-year level. So some courses that are taught as dual credit towards that exist at the community college level, that might be like a career and technical ed type course, if it's not offered at a university level, then it wouldn't be eligible to be approved as an IAI course.
Right.
So just to keep that in mind as well.
Yes. Also, another important clarification. Thank you, Sophia.
Yeah.
Okay, moving forward, some other important updates. This one is actually off to you, Emily.
I'm back. Speaking of dual credit, Sophia, it's like you knew we were about to talk about dual credit. So folks probably saw, or maybe didn't see, or maybe did see, the Illinois Community College Board issued rules for implementation for the Dual Credit Quality Act amendment that was passed last year, which was HB 5506 last year, which included a number of different provisions around professional development plans and a mixed enrollment provision, et cetera. So the ICCB issued their proposed rules for public feedback, public comment in January, February. They are processing those public comments now, I'm sure. The proposed rules really hewed closely to the legislative language. And then the other kind of set of emerging policies that the Higher Learning Commission has a proposed set of policies around faculty qualifications, which would have downstream impacts on dual credit. It incorporates or formalizes the concept of equivalent experience as a potential qualifying factor for faculty, for post-secondary faculty. And again, that would have some direct relevance to dual credit instruction. But so essentially, both these institutions have been gathering input on these proposed policy changes and rules. What's coming next is that the ICCB is probably going to need to reconvene the Dual Credit Quality Act Model Partnership Agreement work group, because there are some implications for the model partnership agreement, or that would need to be additions, and whether it's like an exhibit or some additional guidance around the mixed enrollment components that are opened up through the amendment that was passed last year. We've heard from a lot of folks in the field that there's a real desire for more guidance on the implementation of these various things, right? Including the stuff that's specific to Illinois, whether that's the mixed enrollment or the professional development plans, as well as this like emerging policy from the Higher Learning Commission around equivalent experience. So something that we're just going to be keeping an eye on, and we will happily make you guys aware of opportunities to engage in conversation or feedback processes around these kind of emerging policies and practices. And we're always looking to find out where there are communities sort of leading the charge on implementing these kinds of things in ways that we can learn from and lift up as examples for other communities trying to explore these same issues.
I almost started talking without unmuting myself. We're now on to the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary. So I'm sure as many of you know, the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary has been one of the key resources in the state around career pathways, originally put together in 2018 with the work of all the different agencies, several other partners, gathered together clear specific definitions for the all sorts of career related terms to be used throughout the state. We are currently in the process of updating the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary, largely because it's been quite a bit of time since it was initially published, but also there are more implementation needs now that legislation has pushed the scaling of a lot of the career pathways frameworks in the state, and also just to evolving best practices, any changes in the field and the way terms are being used. So what these changes will look like from a format level, we're going to try and make it a little bit more interactive. So we're going to have a web-based resource. It's going to have documents throughout. And then we're also going to clarify some of the terms where, like I said, the use in the field is changing or different. So that would be potentially work-based learning, some of the continuum elements. And the goal is to have this done and going by the summer.
And shout out to folks who are on the line who have been involved in those conversations. So there's several of you on the line, so appreciate you.
Yes. With that, I will hand it over to Eddie, I believe, for some updates on the PACE framework.
And Eddie, we've got just after this slide, we also have the slide with the draft, both of the high school and in the middle school. So just let Laura know when to advance.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick brief update on the work with the updates to the PACE framework. So we've been working on this for the last year. As you know, the legislation asked for an update and to bring the PACE framework down to 6th, 7th, and 8th, 6th, 7th grade. So a lot of schools that have already been, working on this have actually brought it down, I think, even further. And we've got, Travis on the line here, who was a real big help in getting all this stuff ready over the last few years and really providing a lot of good advice for ISAC to continue to provide the supports. But as we've been working through the updates, we have some drafts that we'll go through really quickly. The timeline at this point is really looking like ISB opened it up for public comment, and that window, I believe, closed earlier this week on the 21st. So we'll be getting together to review those comments, incorporate as necessary, and really, just take the input and see how we can update the PACE framework to better serve everyone's needs. The remainder of March, we'll go ahead and finish that up. In April, ISAC will send out any updated frameworks, hopefully not a lot of changes, but I know that some boards have already taken action. And then April through June, we will be getting the remainder of approvals here with ISAC, ISB, ICCB, and an IBHE if necessary to do any further review. But it's pretty basic. Like I said, the PACE framework I didn't say this, the PACE framework has been out there for about 5 years now. And we've got roughly don't look it up and don't fact check me. You can, this is an estimate number, but I can tell you definitely that we have over 130 schools who have voluntarily adopted a framework and have really done well with it, implementing it, incorporating it into their plans and really serving the students and using this as the documented process for guiding those students through college and career. So very happy with that. We are anticipating a large volume of interaction and supports needed throughout the next few years. And we're excited about that at ISAC. So we are getting ready for that. In the meantime, even though the mandate is not scheduled to kick in, I believe so the timeline for this was that the agencies were going to adopt the updated framework by June 30th of 2023. And then by by July 1, 2024, CPS is supposed to implement. And then by July 1, 2025, every other school and school district in the state of Illinois would have had to adopt it, implement it, and or opt it out. So that's really the timeline that we're working through. But as I was going to say, even though it's not mandated to adopt yet, a lot of schools throughout this year have still been reaching out to us at ISAC, have been using the resource tools out there, and are continuing to voluntarily adopt the framework and put it into their workflow at the school. So we're really happy about that, and of course appreciate all the support that we've received from all of you who are currently in the process of adopting it. Those of you who talk about it, those are you to really putting it out there on our behalf. So Travis asks if there's still the flexibility, and yes, Travis, the flexibility is still there. You adopt the Illinois PACE framework is adopted as is, or there is the flexibility to customize to your students' needs. And again, for our purposes, right, of the agencies, I really want to hit on this is that as we work together in updating the PACE framework, what we're doing is establishing what we at the state agencies feel that we can provide and support, right? Because whether a school adopts or not, the students should not be at a disadvantage of what supports the state has for them. And that's the driver from the state agency perspective is what do we think is necessary, and at what minimum level are we going to provide those quality supports to the school to help the student, but as well, if the student is in a place where they don't have those supports, how do we reach out to them via all of our various networks? So yeah, that is the case there. And again, this also gives the school an option to opt out. If they can opt out of adopting the Illinois PACE framework, if they show that they are meeting the requirement in any other way. So a framework must be had, I guess, is the bottom line here, right? I think we can move on to the next one, Laura. Not going to go through all of these. I hope that most of you are already somewhat familiar with what this looks like. We did make some changes. Pretty minor. I think a lot of the changes were basically to stay in line with the current vernacular, right, of the word of the different initiatives that have coming through, ensure that the PACE framework complements and reinforces all the other stuff that's going on with the CCRIs, with the CCPEs, ensuring that we are all moving ahead in the same way towards the same goals. You'll see that, of course, the Illinois PACE framework, as it is post-secondary and career readiness, is that we do, of course, not just focus on CCRIs and CCPEs, but really the entire gambit of what students should be supported to as they are preparing for that next step after high school, whether it be directly into the workforce, whether that be to a credential, to a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, whatever the case is. This is encompassing all of that. So we made some recommendations at the beginning. When in the process, it opened up for public comment. We hope that we got a lot of good input from that. Take a look at that, incorporate, as I said, we'll put it in there, and then go ahead and move forward with the next iteration of this to help schools implement. We did add, thank you, Laura. We did add the 6th and 7th grade to this, we added also a component to 8th grade. So the PACE framework did already have an 8th grade component to it. And as we were looking at adding the 6th and 7th, we added a couple of things. And really this was more on the developmental side, right? I think that when we're dealing with students in 6th and 7th grade, given their age, given their development, given where they're at in their own process of knowing who they are, and how they fit into this world and all that good stuff, that what we added in here was really to help set them up for what comes next in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It was getting them some exposure to that's identity, that self-advocacy and planning that they're not typically ready for at that age. But it was just more of let's introduce some information here. So if you can see, we still have it broken up into how the schools should be supporting, but we've got in the 6th grade, a student should be exposed to information about and examples of a wide range of careers. Pretty basic stuff. And you can see they're color coded with, again, the identity, planning, and self-advocacy. They should be exposed to language that emphasizes individual skills, strengths, and assets. And they should be exposed to practices that develop a growth mindset. So it's just setting them up for all of those different things that will come later. And then a student should be supported to explore their interests, practice their strengths, and develop their confidence. So again, I'm not going to read through all of this, but you get the gist of we're starting off with introducing some activities or concepts that, again, we fully recognize that this is at the forefront of probably every educator in the growth mindset, and really putting the students in a place where they're advocating for themselves or understanding themselves. So this is just formalizing that, right? It's just putting it in a documented process so that as we've always, from our perspective, so that when people move on, when things happen, that there's a guide that leads, to what should be happening. And again, sharing this with the community, sharing this with the parents, sharing this so that the community knows, oh, this is what the school is working on with my student. This is how I can complement. This is what I can bring to the table. Again, this is as is. We do expect some other things probably to be added through the public comment in the 6th and 7th grade. From a more career task oriented, kind of thing. So because as you can see, we've got only the identity, self-advocacy, and planning rep in there. We don't have the career exploration and development, financial aid and literacy, and the post-secondary education exploration. Even with my glasses, I can't read that. Preparation and selection. So we do see some minor changes and additions coming up here, but we're excited about this next step. I think we got a really good response with the PACE framework from 8th to 12th grade. I know that many schools and many school districts that, again, I always like to call Travis out here just because, he was one of the very, very early adopters, but this isn't his entire school district. Many other school districts have a PACE framework that extends to the 6th grade, 5th grade, and above. And we just really want to ensure that we're helping with that along the way. One key thing that we are going to do is this gives us a great opportunity, and it's scary, but it's an opportunity because we obviously have many more middle schools than high schools. And we are going to have to work with every single one that needs our support in helping these middle schools implement this process. Because the way it was before, it really required a lot of coordination with, a high school, particularly if they're single, I don't know what to call them. I get my names mixed up, but right, you have a high school district, and then you have a K-8 district that aren't really talking to each other, or you've got a high school that has 5 feeder middle schools. So that was really, really difficult. And we saw it in action many times where it was really difficult to get everyone aligned. But by separating both of these frameworks and supporting them, we can work with middle schools and ensure that this is all, going into line and feeding into what the high school is how the high school is working. So we definitely have our work cut out, but we are excited about it, and have received a lot of great support from all of our partners out there. So we thank you for all the work that you've done, and thank you for the continued support around this. Emily, are my slides running out? Am I done?
That's it for your slides, but anything else you want to add, you are welcome to, and we appreciate you jumping in to share updates about the process and all of that.
I am
I don't
good.
know if you're open to taking any questions or not.
If
but,
anyone has questions, I will take them. The worst case scenarios, I say, I don't know.
I don't think I saw any questions about the PACE framework in the chat, but let me double check. And Anna, I know, dropped the PACE symposium link in the chat. We'll also re-up that when we send out the recording.
Thank you, Anna.
Any other questions for Eddie or Anna about the PACE framework stuff from the crew here?
All right. The next thing we want to talk about is some plans and ideas we have for work groups as part of the policy committee. So basically the goal of suggesting these work groups is to dive deeper into some of the topics that have already started to emerge from the meetings that we have had, so that we can identify common challenges, basically dive more into areas that we feel like it would benefit for the group to explore further. The goal of this would be basically to compile the findings into a type of report or memo, depending on the particular group. Some topics that we are initially thinking of for these work groups would be transportation for work-based learning. We know that this was a big piece of conversation at our December meeting, and we actually have a little activity planned for later, kind of centered around this particular topic, as well as professional development plans for dual credit. With this initial piece, we want some feedback. Do you think these are the right topics? Would you be interested in joining these groups?
I'm wondering if one of the other topics that we add to future work group conversation would be the graduation requirements question. If folks, I don't know what folks think about. I'm seeing some nodding. I'm like clicking through the videos to see if I'm seeing anyone nodding.
I think that's a great idea to have the graduation requirements one.
Okay. Seeing yeses in the chat. I'm assuming that's the graduation requirements question. We'll definitely recruit heavily for that conversation too.
Okay. Other considerations that we want to make around these work groups. Are there other stakeholders or work groups that you know of that are already doing work related to these topics that we should be coordinating with, or any resources that we should be aware of? Okay, we have some more specific.
Sorry, hold-
Oh,
Travis, I'm seeing your question in the chat. Is there something we can tackle that would look at existing and suggested legislation that works together and or contradicts and fights with each other? That I feel like is the perennial challenge. And I would offer space to colleagues on the line who are much more deeply involved in the in legislative battles than we at Ed Systems typically are. But I think that is a perennial question across subject areas, truly. So definitely something we could explore a little bit more. Maybe it would be sort of the stuff that's closest to home. I was talking with someone the other day that was saying, you know, their legislative approach this session in particular, like an advocate, was literally just playing defense, right? Because there are just so many bills this year, especially. We've heard just from so many different people that it's a particularly wild ride this year. Jill, to your point about the to your point about ROE and EFE groups, I think this is something that we'll definitely want to kind of identify specifically how we can just appropriately keep folks in the loop, consult with folks, et cetera. And Sarah, thanks for naming the dual credit think tank. That's definitely a good group to note. So Laura, back to you to talk about, we know we're launching a transportation work group because we spent a lot of time in our meeting in December talking about transportation stuff. And so we want to give adequate airtime to it.
Yes, so more specific details for our plans around transportation are to focus on supporting in-school youth. We know that the IWIB Career Pathways for Target Populations Committee is doing some similar looking into transportation conversations, but we wanted to make sure that we were not basically doing the same thing in two different places. So one of the ways that we kind of decided to target more specifically was by focusing on that specific group of students. The plan would be to meet just 3 to 4 times, dive into access obstacles that could range from funding to staffing shortages to policy barriers, aiming to release a memo of findings and any recommendations that we may have by August, and then share those findings with all the relevant people. So I mentioned the IWIB already, but also the P20 Council, ISB, etc.
And certainly some of the folks that y'all are naming in the chat would be relevant for that, and we would continue to identify other folks as relevant.
Yes, if anybody knows right off the bat that you are interested in joining this work group, like Emily said, this is one we know we are going to do. So drop your information that you'd like to be involved in the chat, and we will reference it when we are getting things rolling. With that, our next activity is going to be related to this very topic of transportation for work-based learning. So what we are going to do is a Jamboard activity. So Emily will drop the link to the Jamboard in the chat in a second. Basically, we have several questions that we just want to collect your answers, your ideas, your thoughts on. So we are going to have a Jamboard page for pretty much each specific question, and we're going to go through in a more specific order. Add your answers on Post-it notes for each question. When I switch to the Jamboard, I'll make sure to point out where the Post-it notes are in case anyone is not familiar. Put one idea on each Post-it note. This next one is really important. It's probably Emily's biggest fear. I put it in bright red on all the Jamboards. Make sure you do not clear the frame on the Jamboard. That will clear everything everyone puts on there.
And for some reason, Google doesn't have like a history, like a track history on Jamboards. Like for some reason, it's like the one thing in Google that you cannot look at the old versions of.
And then include all answers and ideas, even if you see someone putting something similar on there already. Having everybody put all of their thoughts and ideas helps us pick out themes. It helps us see, hey, this is a specific thing that's coming up with a lot of people. And then finally, just be as specific as possible. Like I said, that just really helps us dive deeper. So with that, I am going to open up the Jamboard. Someone confirm, oh, people are already adding Post-it notes. You can see it shared on my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the Post-it note is this one right here. So we're going to take some time with this first question for you to just drop in any of your notes. Our first question, I guess I'll read aloud, is going to be, what kinds of policy or legal transportation barriers impact student participation in work-based learning? Please, if you can, indicate if this is at the state or local level.
And I think to the point in the chat, as well as just sort of generally, if possible, try to spell out acronyms. I mean, WBL being work-based learning, so that one we should we'll spell out on the question. But this like MFSAB, I don't know what that is. I know a lot of the alphabet soup, but I don't know that particular flavor. So if you could spell out acronyms, that it would be appreciated for sure. And just as a heads up, we're going to go through a series of questions, right? So we don't have to have all the answers on this slide per se. So, this one's on policy or legal barriers. We've got a question about staffing or school resources. Got a question about funding or finance, and then other kind of challenges. So just wanting to name that you don't have to have all, if there are specific, we want to keep this as close to specific about policy or legal transportation challenges as opposed to sort of the whole universe. We want to kind of get as specific as we can. But there will be space to also add all of those other types of challenges too. And also welcome folks kind of distinguishing where there might be something that you feel like is particular to the type of geography that you are coming from, whether that's more rural or urban or suburban. If there's specificity in there or just like a community level reflection, we definitely welcome that.
What kind of staffing or school resource barriers impact student access to work-based learning?
Yeah, so seeing a lot of reflections on just like truly not enough staff, whether that's credentialed or otherwise, or licensed or otherwise, just really challenging. And also it seems like there's some questions around student demand and like what is kind of possible.
The next question we have is what kinds of funding or finance barriers impact student access to work-based learning?
Sorry, and just to get specific, we want to get specific on transportation. We know that there's a lot of funding and finance barriers to work-based learning more broadly. Certainly feel free to drop those in here, but let's try and focus in on transportation related costs or funding challenges.
I think this question, I'm seeing some answers come up already that I think are good reminders of the comment Emily made earlier, which is feel free to be specific about challenges that come up with your setting geographicly. Obviously, some of those students might face very different challenges, and we want that to be reflected in the investigating that we do. Okay, one more question on the challenges that we have here. Are there any other kinds of transportation related barriers that are impacting student access to work-based learning? So is there anything else that didn't fit into the categories that we've already covered that are making transportation for work-based learning more difficult? Okay, so the next few questions are going to sort of shift from challenges to examples of any creative local solutions to these transportation challenges that you've seen. Especially here, if you can be as specific as possible, and name the community if you can.
I love the solution of an internship across the street from the high school. It certainly resolves a lot of transportation challenges right there. One thing I think we've heard tell of, but I don't know if I would be able to give examples, is the school district operating as an employer, right? So recognizing that school districts have all sorts of kinds of departments and stuff like that, including IT and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. If that is something that is possible, which would also similarly address the sort of transportation issue implicitly. Yeah, the remote internship thing, the virtual internship, I mean, obviously all of us are on Zoom right now, right? So why can't there be some virtual internships as well? And there's certainly the Practera pilot that was happening and other examples of sort of virtual experiential opportunities.
Okay, and then we have one more question. What kinds of state policy solutions can we imagine for transportation challenges that we've come up with?
I love these creative ideas about how to leverage kind of other existing transportation uses of transportation for other services. It's really creative. And a very good starting point for our soon to be founded transportation work group. Yeah, folks can feel free to continue adding. The Jamboard will remain open. We will continue to ask that you not clear it.
Yes, congratulations so far on not clearing it.
Knock on some wood or something.
All right, so this just brings us kind of to the final portion of today's meeting.
I'm just gonna re-up the ask that if anyone didn't already put their sort of email address or kind of yes, please in the chat to join the transportation work group, we'll also reiterate the ask over email, but just wanted to reiterate that if you want to kind of identify yourself now. I know several of you did, so thank you for that. But yeah, would love to just sort of have more folks involved.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that reminder. Wrapping up, before we get into some final announcements, just a little reflection space. Is there anything that we missed that you think is important for the group to have brought to its attention? Is there anything that you heard today that you want to know more about or that you think we should explore? This is open if anyone has anything they want to chime in about. Okay, that is, I can see the logic behind seeing the legislative pieces ahead of time. And of course, we'll also share the materials. If anyone has any feedback on those legislative pieces, after you look at the materials or after you have time to reflect back, you can definitely share that with Emily and I. You can respond to any of our follow-up with any more thoughts or feedback that you have. Oh, interesting. Travis, did you put that on a Post-it note? That's a good thought.
I didn't, I just thought of it.
There you go.
Right. Okay, so some final announcements and pieces. The Success Network Conference was March 8th. Thank you to all of you who were able to join us. All of the conference materials and recordings are available on the Success Network website.
I just want to take a second to shout out Edith Jaguna, our network director, for just like a truly incredible conference. And thanks, I echo Laura's thanks for all of you who were there. So many of you were there. Several of you presented on things. It was the biggest attended conference we've ever had. I don't remember what the exact final number was. Edith, you can let me know, but it was huge and super exciting to celebrate 10 years with all of you.
Yes, so if you weren't there, and now that we've told you how wonderful it was, you can find all of the recordings and materials online. As kind of a follow-up to this conference, the Success Network also has 3 spring webinars coming up. These are all free and different topics related to the Success Network goals. We will be sharing the link about how to register for any of these webinars. So if you see anything you're interested in, definitely we encourage you to sign up for those. Also, a few other events to save the date for. We already mentioned, but we're going to plug again the Illinois PACE Symposium on April 20th. That's going to be in Springfield. And then save the date in July for the College Changes Everything Conference. That will be in Tinley Park. You will see both events are going to be back in person for this year. So if you're looking to get back to seeing people and learning in person, these are both 2 really great opportunities for you. And the links also are here and will be shared in our materials that we send out. So feel free to check it out. PACE Symposium, sign up if you're interested. Our next meeting for the policy committee full meeting is going to be in June. There is a possibility that it might be rescheduled due to a conflict, but if you register, we'll make sure we keep you in the loop in case anything changes. So that's definitely another date to keep in mind. Another ask that we have, we really would like to highlight some innovative leadership community work. So if you are willing to share, we would love to hear about work that is happening in your local communities, and any innovative local practices that you think would benefit the committee to hear about. Please let us know, and we can set aside some time in a future meeting for you to share. And then the policy committee website. So since our last meeting, you probably have seen this mentioned in some of the emails you've received, but we launched an official tab for the policy committee on the Success Network website. This is where you can register for any future meetings. We've scheduled everything for 2023. So I just shared the most upcoming dates, but you can sign up all the way through December if you'd like to. And then we also have recordings of past meetings. And then if you know anyone else that you think would be interested in joining us, they can opt in to the emails that we will be sending out on the website as well. And then lastly, thank you all for joining us for the policy committee meeting. We have a few minutes left, so if anyone has anything else they want to share or discuss, feel free. Otherwise, I think we were able to give you a few minutes back.
Thanks everyone for participating and for all the great work you lead.
Thank you.